Welcome to the Class Apart. I'm your host, Arjun. Thank you for joining me as I embark upon a journey across the world of higher education. Each episode, we'll discover exciting alumni experiences, gain industry insights with various stakeholders, and explore the ever-changing landscapes of global learning. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Class Apart for all of you that have listened to episodes in the past. For everyone that is tuning in and are listening to an episode for the first time, please do hit that subscribe button, and I thank you for taking the time out to listen to the episode. Today, I've got a very special guest. I met her for the first time, when was it? 2012? 11? 11, 12, something like that. Yeah, while she was in the UK. We'll get into those details later. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Aditi. So, hey Aditi, how's it going?
Hi.
Everything all right?
Yeah, everything's good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Well, as good as you can be during coronavirus and everything. But I mean, got food, got a roof, got a job. Can't really complain.
No, I think we're pretty fortunate in that way.
Definitely. So, I mean, obviously, I know this information. I've kind of, been around a little bit during the journey. But just for the listeners, I wanted to ask, where did you go for university?
I went to England to Durham University, which is in the town of Durham, up north.
Surprise, surprise. And then after Durham?
I finished my undergrad in 3 years, and then I moved back to Delhi, which was home for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there for about 2.5 years working.
Mm-hmm.
After which I decided to move to the US, to Baltimore on the East Coast, to complete my master's degree. And I did that in 2 years, and then I worked for another 1.5 years. And I'm still working there, but I kind of don't live anywhere in particular. I'm mostly on the road.
So just for, again, the listeners, where did you do your master's?
At Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore at the School of Public Health.
Right. So, I mean, like, just to kind of put it out there, you're pretty smart, I'm assuming, because Johns Hopkins is kind of, like, it's a big deal, right? Like,
I mean, it was a dream come true for me. So, sure, it was great. It was a great place to be.
Happy days, happy days. And so, why? Obviously, I mean, as you mentioned, you are from Delhi, and then you decide to go to the USA. You decide to go to the UK, then you come back, then you decide to go to the USA. Both, I mean, amazing countries, right? The UK and the USA. But yeah, why did you decide to pursue an international education?
So, I mean, I think it's an interesting journey for me. I can't say it was my plan all along. In fact, my plan was quite the opposite. My plan was to finish out school in Delhi, where I grew up, go to college there. I even had a college in mind just because I grew up with a lot of my parents' friends having been to the college, and I kind of had a vague idea about what I wanted to study.
Which college?
And all of those things. It was LSR, Lady Shri Ram School, as part of DU.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was really my plan, but plans don't really work out very often. So when I was in grade 9, we ended up moving to Shanghai, China, because of my dad's work. And so I finished high school there. And for 2 reasons, really. But the school that I was enrolled in the IB program, which was the International Baccalaureate program. And that kind of really changed things to me. So one, I mean, it was a tough transition, but I really enjoyed that way of learning and teaching. And it was very different from anything that I'd had in India before. And so that kind of also, being an international school, it kind of started opening up opportunities, but also that was the first time I started thinking about even pursuing education abroad.
Mm-hmm. So it gave you a little bit of a perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot more than just a little. But so I think it's the first time I even started considering higher education outside of India. It's the first time I'd really even lived outside of India. And the fact that I was in a international school, a British international school, it meant that I was obviously surrounded by people from all over the world. And so in a way, the world felt more accessible. And I kind of started exploring my options and opportunities, but also for practical reasons. Just the way I think IB is structured is, by the time I would finish my exams, admissions in the Indian system would have already shut down. And so I would have had to take a gap year and then go to India if that was my plan still. So that kind of wasn't what I was interested in doing at that moment. Plus also, given the fact that I had moved out of India and had been exposed to this, what I call an incredible, education system, I think a lot of people, when I spoke to them, it just started making sense to explore going abroad. And UK was really the first option that came to mind. I was really unfamiliar with the US at that time, and I don't know exactly why. Like, I didn't really know many people who had gone to the US to study. Maybe it was also because I was in a British school, and so, that was really...
Makes sense.
Yeah. And my elder brother also ended up going to uni in England, and so it kind of just made sense. So that's why I went. That's why I went to the UK. That's what took me there.
Sweet. And what did you study at the University of Durham for your undergrad?
So I enrolled in the combined honors program, which essentially allowed me to take up to 3 subjects where I could study full time. So I did anthropology, history, and international relations.
I don't know how to react to that, to be honest with you. I come from quite a different chain of thought. I didn't technically want to get a degree, and now I'm sat kind of, talking to someone who did a triple major from one of the top 10 universities in the UK. But life's funny like that. So why choose a program like that? Durham University, obviously, to be honest, if I had the opportunity to go to Durham, I would have thought about it. The only reason I probably would have said no is because it would be like 5 minutes away from my family. But yeah, why the program?
So for me, it's actually interesting. I think I ended up choosing Durham specifically for the program, and it wasn't the other way around, that I chose Durham and then found the program. And so the way it worked out was, during IB, I kind of really, really, really fell in love with history and biology, and I had a very deep love for both those subjects, and I was convinced that I have to do both. Mm-hmm. And no one really, like my parents or teachers, mentors, everyone was like, usually you're going to have to pick one or the other, or at least, dominant. One of them is going to have to be more dominant in your education. And I really couldn't make up my mind which one that would be. And then while we were looking at colleges, one of my absolutely favorite teachers, he'd been to Durham. And so he was hugely, excited about Durham, and he would talk to all of us about it and say, guys, it's a great university. Do explore it as one of your options. And so that's when Durham first kind of came into my radar. And when I looked into it, it was one of 2 universities, at least at that time. And the second one was Lancaster, I think. One of 2 universities which offered a program such as combined honors. So many universities often joint honors, in which it's usually like a math and a science, or a language with a social science, basically combinations.
Similar discipline.
Make more sense together. Exactly. It's very similar. They kind of feed into each other. But Durham offered this thing called combined honors in arts and social sciences, and you could really pick up to 3 subjects. And they didn't have to connect in obvious ways. But the caveat is that when you applied, you could say, okay, I want to study this, this, and this. And then the director of the program would really meet with everyone individually before kind of admitting you, like speak with us and try and understand where we're coming from and why these 3 subjects. And I think he had this magical ability to help us really see how the subjects tie in together. So, I went in straight up saying, I love history, I love biology. These are the reasons why I love it. And he wasn't shocked at all. And he was like, yeah, those are great subjects. And then he said, okay, so let's see what we can do with them. And I think he just somehow found this way to tie it all together for us. And so it basically progressively just made more and more sense for me to do that. So that's really why I chose the program. And when I went there, I got even more excited because I learned I could add on a 3rd subject to this. And so I said, yes, let's do it. Why not? And so then I added on a 3rd one, which was international relations for me. And I really feel like that combination worked really, really well for me.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I think it did work really well for you, considering everything that happened afterwards. So that's how you kind of stumbled upon your subject decision at the University of Durham. How did you make your decision for Johns Hopkins?
Right. So this goes back to Durham, but right at the end, about some months before you graduate, the university encourages you to meet with a career counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Many people seek it out, but for even those who are not seeking it actively, they just advise you to go explore your options. And so I said, sure, why not? And at that time, I was clear I wanted to move back to India, be home. And I was also very clear on the interests I had, but I didn't really know what kind of a job that translates into. So
Mm-hmm.
I went to meet with this career counselor, and as I sat down, she asked me, she's like, so remind me again, what is it that you're studying in combined honors? And so I told her I'm doing anthropology and history and international relations. And so she looked at me, she said, oh, so kind of like public health. And I felt like at that moment, my entire world just made sense to me. So I smiled at her and I said, yes, actually, public health. And I think it just, it clicked in my mind that that is what I wanted to do. And so that conversation, of course, was very helpful. And so at that point, I knew that I wanted to move back to India, pursue public health. And because the field of public health in terms of skills and generally just job profiles, etc., all of that was a little new to me. I didn't know the language around a lot of that. And so I wanted to work in that space and really make sure and understand myself and what it is that I wanted to do there, and then pursue my master's. Also, as it turns out, a lot of the master's programs in public health do require you to have worked in it, just to have understood the nuances of it a little bit and really what you want to do, because there's so much you can do. And so that's really how I knew I wanted to do public health. And once you throw the word public health out there, I mean, not to brag, but one of the first names that pops up everywhere is just Hopkins and
Yep.
Bloomberg. And so that's the first school of public health that I heard of. And I remember when I told my mom, I went to her with this epiphany that, Mom, I want to do public health. And she just smiled, like she knew all along that, yeah, that's what I was going to end up. And she also said, oh, you should explore Bloomberg. And I remember Googling the Bloomberg School of Public Health and thinking, oh, okay, this is in the US. Okay, that's where I have to go.
Yep.
So that's really how then I eventually got to Hopkins. I, of course, ended up doing a lot more research and applying to other schools as well in the US for public health. And it turns out there are many, many, many great schools of public health in the US.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think US was just no longer a barrier for me. And then I was like, okay, sure. I basically just knew that I had to be where I could get the most out of what I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to be able to pursue those opportunities. So that's how I landed up in the US, really.
Sweet. I mean, to be honest, you make it sound really easy, but that must have been quite a journey.
Yeah, it definitely did. But like I said, maybe this is just me, but I think the whole way through, I was so motivated by what I knew it was taking me towards. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm one of the lucky ones that has really enjoyed what I have done throughout at every step. And so I was really excited. And of course, a lot of people were like, oh, okay, so now you're going to the US and you like just came back from the UK and like, and a lot of people, of course, asked me things like, have you seen the TV show The Wire? Because it's based in Baltimore and I was going to Baltimore, and Baltimore is just known to be historically a little unsafe and all of those things. And of course, the US compared to the UK is a bigger culture shock in some ways for people who've grown up in India. And so many people were surprised by my choice to just, without much hesitation, to just be like, yes, I'm going to the US. So, I mean, there were definitely hardships in terms of also getting used to applications, and education systems are so different and the way they approach things are different. I mean, my biggest challenge has been between the two systems has been remembering the different spellings, when to use an S. And seriously, I know it sounds so silly, but given that I'm in research and we do a lot of writing, that's been my biggest struggle. But no, I mean, jokes apart though. So it was in some ways challenging, but I never felt like a barrier to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, like, we've gone through why and what and where, and a little bit of who as well. As you mentioned, that professor at the University of Durham was an influencing factor in that decision. But if we kind of look at it, kind of zoom out, and look at it from an overarching sight, for both experiences individually, were you satisfied with your university experience? Like, did the university meet your expectations for both Durham and Hopkins?
Yeah, I mean, I think it more than met. It exceeded my expectations in
Mm-hmm.
both instances. So Durham is just, I mean, when you get there, it's just this beautiful, breathtaking place. And I was just like, I know I can be happy here. And it was nice. I found nice people. It was, Durham also has this system where they have a colleges, like a collegiate system.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get assigned to a college, and that college kind of becomes your home. And then you also meet people from other colleges when you go to school. And like, I really enjoyed all of that. I enjoyed meeting new people. And of course, studies was, it went up many, many notches,
Yeah.
just because, you're now at a different level. And but I really enjoyed the access it gave me to so many different people from so many different minds. And I think my program in particular was so flexible that it was great. And so I really enjoyed my experience at Durham, both academic and non-academic. Outside of academics,
Really?
that was great.
Durham, non-academic experiences were good. I mean, like, no offense, but I mean, obviously, where I went, and Durham is it's a little bit quieter. It's a
Oh,
little bit on
it's
the quieter side.
no, it is on the quieter side, and I think it's also where the geriatric society really lives and resides. And so, but I think that's maybe what I liked about it. I've grown up and always lived in big cities, and so Durham that way was different for me. It was a much smaller town. I could walk from one end to the other in like 45 minutes, but
Mhm.
I liked it. I mean, it was nice. There was still a lot to do. I mean, within the college system, there was of course sports and music and arts, and there was all kind of stuff. And I never really found myself bored of the place or any of those things. And I mean, of course, you have friends and people to keep you busy. And I mean, that's how I met you. So it was, we
What
had
was it? It
fun.
was it was a Diwali party, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a Diwali party. And
Jesus.
so, there was those kind of things. And I mean, you probably also remember every now and then we'd kind of drive out and do things like, what was it? The car racing thing that we did?
Go-karting.
Go-karting, yes. So,
Oh my
you
God,
know,
but I was a complete, I mean, like, just because I can't say those words, I was quite, yeah, I wasn't a very nice person when it came to go-karting. I was quite a bully.
yeah, I remember that. But, so yeah, no, Durham was fine. It was really everything that
Hmm.
I needed and things I didn't know I needed. It was
Hmm.
good.
Hmm. And I think a
And
lot
it
about
kind
the
of,
undergraduate experience is the social aspect of it. And I
right.
feel, I mean, I personally can't speak to a master's degree because, I mean, I don't have one. But
Mm,
I feel like when you kind of enter the territory of a master's degree and you kind of specialize in that manner, as you did in public health, the social aspect, whilst still prevalent, it does take a bit of a back step, in terms of like, you're not going to concentrate so much on your social aspect of things when the master's degree is kind of that intense.
yeah, I don't disagree with that. And maybe this is just my experience, but I think what ended up happening is, of course, in an undergrad program, you're one in many, right? There's so
Hmm.
many of you. And you, of course, have your group and you have your peers and friends. But I think what happened is when I went to my master's program, I think our cohort was 16 of us, and it kind of,
Or like one
um,
six.
yes, 1/6, that was it. There were 16 of us, and we actually were, by the time we ended our course, there was 13 of us. Three people
Wow.
had to leave for various reasons, so we were 13 of us. And we, whether we wanted it or not, we became really close to each other because all of our classes were together,
Hmm.
at least for the most part. They were together. We relied on each other a lot to learn and to work through things. And we ended up spending time together outside of school as well. And so, I mean, I think those actually are some of my bestest friends today. I mean, so yeah, we didn't have raging parties, and that was never my scene anyway.
Yeah.
But I think in many ways I created deeper social bonds, and not just with my peers, but even with my professors, I mean, I think when you're at a master's level, because you're a much smaller cohort, and so it's very intimate in that way. And this could also be US versus UK. Now, I don't know what master's is in the UK. I didn't do that. And I don't know what undergrad is in the US.
Mm-hmm.
But just comparing my experiences, like we spent a lot more time with our professors, working with them, and they knew us very intimately from the beginning. They worked with us, and so I think in that way my social life was almost like more richer, if not not thriving in a party way, but we spent a lot of time together, like even if it would be drives and meals and coffee and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that way
Yep. So
it
you
was
drive on the
great.
wrong side of the road, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. You get used to that too.
So, from a international student perspective, you'd lived in Delhi predominantly your whole life, and then you'd moved to Shanghai, which must have been its own culture shock. But to Durham and then to the USA, I feel like both aspects, like the undergraduate in Durham and the masters in Hopkins, would have brought different aspects to where you struggled. Um, would you be able to identify some places where you did struggle, both at the undergraduate level and at the master's level?
Yeah. So, like you said, China was a much bigger culture shock than either the US or the UK in so many ways. So, I think the UK, was not as much of a culture shock. And maybe that was because I was lucky enough to have traveled quite a bit growing up with my family. And so, a lot of that wasn't new. And I'd been to England also before. And I think since my older brother was there, I kind of was familiar with his experiences. So the UK was not as much of a shock. The US, again, I won't call it a shock, but there was clearly a lot more that I had to get used to. And we laugh about it, but I think language in a way was so huge. So a lot of the vocabulary that we use is very different from the ones that my friends were using. And for very day-to-day lives, nothing major. But what I would call like a plug point, they would call an outlet, right? And things like that. And so I think that was really an initial barrier, which we were constantly trying to get through. And I had great friends who would be very nice about always explaining things to me.
Yeah.
But, so again, not a culture shock, but the US just does everything so differently. Even this whole culture of being so familiar with your seniors. I mean, in India, hierarchy is such a thing.
Yeah.
Power dynamics is such a thing. And so when I got there, I was used to calling everyone Dr. So-and-so, or Mr. So-and-so. And a lot of my professors who actually, I mean, I guess having worked with many people from cultures like ours were like, we understand that you come from a place where there's this hierarchy and things, so we completely understand this is your comfort zone, but please feel free to call me by my first name, and that is totally fine with me. And it's funny, it took me a long time to start doing that. So all of my friends would just call everyone seniors, really really senior people like deans and people that you've only read about for years in papers and books, and they're in front of you now, and how do I not call them Dr. so and so, right?
That's so funny that you kind of
yeah.
referred to them as people that you read about. I have a
do.
feeling that, compared to the general populace, you read about very different people. I can guarantee you, I don't sit at home on a Saturday night, open a book and read about, the deans of universities and stuff like that. Guaranteed.
I mean, I'm not reading a book about the deans, but certainly I'm reading about vaccines and how they were discovered. And then you kind of come across people who worked on discovering those vaccines. And to me, that was incredible, right? Now, I literally would see these people with so much reverence, and I'd be like, oh my God, Dr. So-and-so and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd just be like, Azdi, call me Peter or whatever.
Yeah.
And that took me a while. And of course, generally, I think how casual everything is compared to how formal everything is in the UK, that was different for me. So again, I don't think any of it was a culture shock, but things were different. Even in terms of just curriculum, like the higher education curriculum in itself was so different.
Yeah.
And the way they examine you, the way they expect you to, put things together, all of that stuff was different. So it definitely took getting used to. But again, I think I had a great support system out there
Mm-hmm.
that at no point really made me feel like I was an international student. In fact, like I was saying, we were 16 of us, right? And of the 16, I was the only international student. I did not know that until 3 months into my program, because everyone else was, from different parts of the US. And when you're there, you just don't realize that you're the only one not from this country, because everyone is so different from each other. So 3 months into the program, I realized I'm the only one who was not American. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, you know,
Yeah.
so yeah. But again, no major culture shocks, though. One of my favorite discoveries from the US has been the garbage disposal, which many people aren't familiar with, but it's basically a contraption that goes in the sink and it makes this really loud noise, and then it eats up all the waste instead of us having to throw it out. And that was fascinating for me.
Mm-hmm. Where does the waste go?
It actually gets really broken down and then it gets filtered into a different system. So it's very efficient that way.
So like it's basically a garbage. It's basically a place where garbage goes,
No,
where
not really.
normal
I'll,
garbage wouldn't go.
in a way, yes. So usually, like food waste, things like that, or like eggshells or banana peels, you
Yeah.
would throw it
Yeah.
into a
Which people
dustbin,
kind
right?
of just like burn on the side of the road in India.
In India, yes. In some parts of India. And like in India, we don't really have a well-defined system of recycling and stuff like
Yep.
that, right? Which, of course, does exist in the UK and the US, but in the US, a lot of this, the food waste especially, you can, instead of throwing it somewhere separately, it kind of, the biodegradable stuff kind of goes into the sink, and the sink just eats it up
Mm-hmm.
and it filters it differently. It's basically just a more efficient system, and it doesn't kind of all go to landfill and stuff like that.
And
And
it's all recyclable
uh,
stuff that goes into the garbage disposal, I'm assuming.
so recyclable stuff is different. This is biodegradable stuff,
All right.
if that makes sense. So like I
Yeah,
won't be
absolutely.
throwing recyclable plastic and stuff like that. Anyways,
Yeah.
I know we're like digressing, but it was just really exciting for me. I was just like, oh, this is exciting. This is not something I've ever come across before in my life. So
Yeah, definitely. So, with the struggles that you faced, again, both at Durham and Hopkins, UK, USA, kind of different parts of the world, what are some things you probably would have liked to know before you went? So, painting the picture, like you're 17, 18, you've applied to Durham, you've got accepted, you're about to hop on the flight there, and someone says, oh, wait, you should probably know XYZ before you go. And exact same situation for Hopkins, like you're 23, 24 before you go, and then someone asks, like, yo, these are probably some things you should know before you go. Like, what would some of them be?
yeah. I wish I had a more intelligible answer for this, but so I think again, both UK and US, I think there would be different things that I would like to know. And to first say though, I think both universities did prepare you well in the sense. So once you got admitted and everything, I think there was a lot of information sharing, a lot of access to their resources and their students and stuff like that. And like really for someone like me, I was mostly interested in the academics, and I really wanted to know what are the courses I can pick from, and how I had to try and understand the credit system, which was not a thing I had ever been exposed to before. And
Mm-hmm.
so to me, I had access to a lot of that information, and I had access to very detailed information on what I can do and cannot do. So those things are very clear to me. I knew where I was going to stay, and I was comfortable with all of that. But with England, again, this has nothing to do with higher education, but it does impact your experience. What I wish I was better prepared for was the weather. And so like Durham can get really quite cold, and I know for many it's just usual winters, but I hadn't quite lived in a place where temperatures would fall that low. I'd also never lived in a place where it would snow. And I think the hardest part for me, who loves the sun, like loves it, it was the fact that in winter months at 3 p.m. it would get dark and it would be wet. And on some days my classes wouldn't begin before 4 p.m. And so I was literally stepping out when it felt like night. And that was actually quite depressing. And so in a way, like I said, I know it doesn't have anything to do with the education system, but I mean, I just wish I was better prepared for the weather and that I was freezing less often. That was really the UK. But I also feel like there is so much that you just kind of have to learn once you get there.
Yeah.
And so if your basics are in place, which is if you have a general idea of your course structure or where you're going to stay, which is really the important things, or like if you're staying in a place where they don't have a cafeteria, the fact you should know that, hey, you're going to have to cook,
Oh, that
um,
was going to be like, yeah, yeah,
yeah. And I think those are the big things, because many people, when they're graduating from high school, I don't think are equipped enough, don't have the knowledge or skill to cook the way you're used to your parents cooking at
yeah.
home or grandparents and stuff. And so, but for me, again, it was a smoother transition. I knew I was going to be staying in a college. I knew for the first year we would be eating all our meals in a cafeteria, and that was fine. And then beyond that, I knew I would move out and cook for myself. And even that, I felt like knowing what would happen in my second year was good for me.
Mm-hmm.
What I guess another thing I did wish I knew, and I know this is not true across all UK universities, is that not that it would have changed the way I approach things, but I think it may have changed it for others. But knowing that in the UK, like just the percentage breakdown of how much each year actually, like how much your
Contributes.
contributes to your final grade in a way. So
Mm-hmm.
for us at Durham, your first year is nothing, like it doesn't contribute to your final grade at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure, it works well, and I think it really helps, especially if you're getting used to a new education system, and that transition can be huge, right? And so I had no idea that that was the case, and
So you actually
but
studied.
that's what I'm saying. I don't think I would have not studied even if I knew that. But for some reason, I didn't know that. I don't know how that just, never came across me, and I just missed it. But again, those knowing those things, of course, helps.
Mm-hmm.
In the US, I think, again, I went in knowing a lot already. And again, like you said, I think at a master's level, things get more serious and more intense. And like people are taking what you're trying to do a little more seriously because they know you're there with a purpose and all of those things. And so I felt like, again, I was well informed, well prepared. This again sounds funny, but the thing I wish someone had told me was that the transition will be easier than you think. Like I was a little fearful
Mm-hmm.
of the transition of what it's going to be like living in the US. I had no idea what to expect, and I honestly went in with a mindset of, okay, I'm really just going here to focus on my academics. I almost like I don't need friends. I have all the friends I need, and that's my focus. But I kind of got that. It was so smooth, so easy. I ended up making some of the bestest friends I have today, and
Mm-hmm.
it just worked out much better. So I wish I told myself that you don't have to stress as much, but I didn't know that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think the cooking point that you made is definitely very valid. I think in my first and second year of uni, I didn't really cook. And by didn't really cook, I mean I didn't cook at all. And obviously there was so many other things that I wanted to do. Like I wanted to get to my tennis training, I wanted to get to my squash training, I wanted to go out with friends. So I'd really just eat like the cheapest, most affordable kind of, pretty much garbage that was available,
Yeah.
just so that I could save that penny to do all the other extracurriculars. And
Yeah.
I put it on. I put on the weight. And
Yeah,
then, I
that's quite
mean,
common.
yeah. And then in my final year, I managed to cut down. But, just putting that out there.
I was I was gonna say is that also my school I think did a good job of preparing us. They had this thing just before we graduated called Moving On Week, and in that week every day they focused on a different life skill. So they taught us literally what it's like to have a bank account, what does it mean to have a savings account, how tuition works in a way, how to iron your clothes, how to sew on buttons. I'm not kidding. Like our school was like, for some of you this might be child's play, but for many of you learn it.
One sec.
And so
You
knowing
actually
those things
ironed your
helped.
clothes at university.
Okay, yes, I'm one of those people who loves ironing clothes. I iron everything, including my bed sheets. I really like them nice and crisp and neat.
I might.
So yes, I
so
did
my
iron at
So
university.
my version of ironing was that you pull out the clothes straight from the dryer. They're nice and hot, like they're really warm and they're really nice when they come out of the dryer. I used to go back to my room, lift up my mattress, lay out all of my clothes underneath my mattress, and then put the mattress down. And then like 3 hours later, I'd lift the mattress up again and everything was flat and everything was, ironed.
Yeah.
It just, it
No,
works.
that didn't quite work for me. But just saying, I mean, the fact that, someone thought that we should teach even these basic skills, I think that was helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think genuinely that should be implemented across schools in general,
Yeah,
especially schools which have a high number of students that do look for international education, or to be very honest, education
absolutely.
outside of the home city. It doesn't necessarily have to
Yes.
be international.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I mean, kind of coming on to one of my more preferred questions. I mean, I'm gonna kind of ask that we keep the coronavirus aspect of it apart, because obviously this has just been like a freak show, and it's just been kind of something that came in by surprise. It's not a part of kind of even mine, or I would assume your regular operations. But what do
Yeah.
you do now, and how did your education kind of help that trajectory?
Sure. Okay. So I work in research, in implementation research specifically. And so what I really do is I kind of work on in within public health. I work on trying to understand social and behavioral dimensions of program adoption
Mm-hmm.
and trying to make sure that when we implement public health programs that it's done equitably and fairly. And that's really my focus area.
Okay.
And so public health broadly. And how did my higher education trajectory get me here? I mean, I think to me now, like when I look back, I think it's really obvious. But at the
Mm-hmm.
time, as I was making my way here, I don't think it was that obvious to me. I was really just following opportunities and what seemed really interesting to me. And I've been fortunate enough to always just be able to follow what seemed most interesting. But like I said, when I got to Durham, I went in with the subjects that made most sense to me: history, biology, which led me to medical anthropology, which led me to the career counselor telling me public health. And I was like, yes. Knowing that, when I came back to India, I was able to generally do some research and reach out to people and kind of explain to them my background and what about public health interests me or why I think this is the area I want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting. I never thought this, but public health ties in really well and really closely to medical anthropology, which I didn't know at that time. So the fact that I had a degree in medical anthropology was really, really attractive to many people. And they were like, great, and so that way, I think I got a lot of opportunities to engage with in many, many public health projects. So that's how I got my first job with a healthcare organization. And my job really was to work in outreach program activities and kind of develop their public health vertical.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with a very small team. And so we were all kind of learning. And I think what really helped is the whole time, while I might not have had the language or the lingo for public health, I just knew what I thought, I felt it. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that, okay, here is a challenge, here is a community with no access to clean water. I know we have to get them access to clean water. Very intuitive things. And I think that's
Yep.
the best thing about public health is that it's very intuitive. It's not rocket science for anyone. And of course, there's so many challenges, but I think I really enjoyed kind of grappling with that. And I knew that my next step was a master's just because especially in public health, and I know this is not true for many areas of education, you kind of need to have a master's because that's the first place where you actually get to specialize in public health. You don't get to
Mm-hmm.
do that in your undergrad. There are not really many undergrad public health programs.
Yeah.
So I
I
knew I
haven't
was
come
working
across any.
towards that. Yeah, I think the US has some, but the UK certainly doesn't. But even within the US, it's really in at the master's level where you engage with what you need, the skills you need to be a public health practitioner. So I knew I was working towards my master's. And so I figured I got this experience working with the hospital, and I decided I wanted to work on the academic side of things because I was just enjoying the research. So I kind of moved to a more research-based institution, which led me to Hopkins. Hopkins, of course, Mecca of public health. I mean, it was great. And that really, I mean, Hopkins and even Durham and everything in between, really, I think it really, really shaped my mind and my heart. And a lot of it wasn't even just the education, it was the people, and it was their passion, it was their stories, it was what they wanted to do in life. It was also inspiring. And so, I mean, Yeah, I think my higher education experience has been blessed and like just so excellent. And I think that kind of the whole experience led me to where I am today. And I think having been fortunate enough to go to good institutions where I really was able to engage with issues that interested me, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's kind of then now put me in a favorable position where I feel skilled. Like I definitely left both my institutions feeling like I have learned something, very
Mm-hmm.
practical skills that I knew how to apply. And I think I take that for granted, but I know many people don't feel that way.
Yep.
But
Yep. I mean,
I definitely did.
it kind of sounds like you pursued the subjects which you were extremely interested in and that you would actually enjoy learning more about. Like you
Oh,
didn't have an
completely.
end goal to study those subjects. You were just like, I like it. It's a good subject. I'm going to go and study it. And then it kind of developed from there.
Completely. Yeah, no, I wouldn't put it any other way. And I think because I did that, because I was constantly trying to pursue what really excited me, what I was so passionate about, it kind of led me to people and
Hmm.
to opportunities. And so that's why I think it's been great for me because I am really in the space where I want to be. And so at no point do I feel like, oh, I'm learning this for a job. In fact, I'm doing my job is really what I love. And so like I just ended up in this great,
Yeah.
place. And I think both the institutions I went to had a lot to do with it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I mean, like, I always say that actually, I don't always say that. I don't know why I just said that. But I feel that, I feel that it's always very important to pursue what you enjoy. And I mean, there is always a way of making a living and there's always a way of contributing if you enjoy what you do. And what I did something quite opposite. I got a degree for the sake of it, and I got a degree which I would be able to kind of use. I was like, okay, I like mathematics, I understand business, let's go do business management with accounting and finance. You know, it just makes sense. But if I look back at what I could have done, I mean, I
mm,
probably still would do the same because now it's led me to where I am now, where I'm very happy. But there are some other subjects I probably would have liked to be a bit more, you know, involved with.
yeah.
And I feel getting a degree thinking that you will get a good career out of this degree is counterintuitive. I feel more if you pursue the subject that you enjoy, the career will come on its own.
Yeah. And that's definitely easier said than done. I mean,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
when you think about it, especially like I know public health in particular, we always joke about it that we're all in this and we're all so happy, but it's really not a lucrative space to be in. I mean, we're constantly fighting for money for work, but I mean, we kind of never fight for money for ourselves just because that's just becomes less important. And it's just something you kind of expect going into this that, yeah, this is
Yeah.
not going to be a money making business. And so, yeah, I mean, but at the same time, I can very happily also say that at no point have I felt like what I'm doing is not commensurate to what I'm earning. Like, I feel like I've always been paid as much as I felt like I've needed.
Yep.
And I think once you enjoy the work the way I've been fortunate enough to do, it just makes sense. And so then I'm not trying to chase.
Coming to my final question, I'd just like to ask, are you an advocate of international education? And if so, why? I mean, obviously, I think this is a very biased question because if you ask me that, then it was never in the books for me to study in India. Like, it just wasn't an option. Like, it was never going to
Right.
happen. But you actually did have that option. And to be very honest, you were inclined toward that option until you did decide to go
Yeah.
abroad. So, where do you stand?
I mean, if it's not obvious already, I am a huge advocate for it, yes. And I think for me, it was just serendipity. I mean, just the way a lot of it worked out. And I recognize that a lot comes with trying to pursue a higher education, right? I mean, financial tuition just being the
Hmm.
biggest and most obvious one, that is not as easy for everyone to work with. And of course there are scholarships and all of those things, but one, I feel like we're not told about that enough, about
Yep.
those options. I feel like I always find out about scholarships, like, after I've already finished my experience. And so I wish there is more of that. I wish there is more support for people who would like to pursue a higher education.
Mhm.
So there's, of course, that obvious one. Moving away from home is, difficult for so many people, partly moving away from family. Sometimes it's just moving away from a familiar setting. I mean, for me, it was fine. I think I had a great time. Maybe it was just my personal experience. I know a lot of my friends and peers didn't adjust as easily or as well for very many reasons. And I know we all struggled with it initially, but so those things can be difficult. But I mean, absolutely. But I would, as an absolutely to pursuing higher education, but I would also say don't do it for the heck of it. Don't do it for the title or the stamp of any one university. Like, really do it if you find meaning in it. Like, if you find courses that are exciting and are meaningful and will take you to where you want to be next. And but I would also just have this underpinning sort of, I mean, you would know this, we kind of spent a lot of time in the Indian education system, and it never quite gave me what these institutions did in terms of learning how to think and critically engage with
Mhm.
issues. And so for all of those reasons, for I feel like, yeah, I would definitely say do it if you can. It's so rewarding, not just academically. I mean, I think you grow as a person. Being away from home, you grow as a person, learning how to cook and iron and, navigate your life
Yep.
without your parents and familiar settings. I mean, it's really made me who I am today. So definitely.
So, I mean, yeah, thank you. That was definitely very insightful. And thank you for coming on the show and taking the time out to kind of talk to me today.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome. I really felt like I learned a lot about myself today as well. So it was great. I mean, no, thanks for having me.